Putin is openly bullying the United States, and the disagreements between Washington and Brussels have only played into the hands of the Kremlin, said Andrius Kubilius in an interview with Lithuanian national television. At the same time, the European Commissioner for Defense and Space believes that the initially sharp international policy of Donald Trump's administration is gradually shifting towards a deeper understanding of reality. This view is also shared by several other European politicians.
We can see that the Americans are trying to reach a peace agreement. Sometimes it seems that they have to go through these lessons from Putin to truly understand who he is. In my opinion, Putin is currently just openly mocking the Americans. One good thing is that when the Americans began behaving differently, when there was more sincerity in our relations, Europeans were moved. Now we see much more of the right and necessary efforts to unite and demonstrate our leadership. Andrius Kubilius, the European Commissioner for Defense and Space, in an interview with Lithuanian national television. A few weeks ago, Ukraine agreed to an unconditional ceasefire, while Russia continues to commit war crimes. And I believe that today, Russia must give the United States a clear answer, whether it wants to pursue peace or not.
The United States will have to impose additional tariffs on Russian oil if the Kremlin fails to fulfill the ceasefire agreement. This was stated by Donald Trump, who added that he still believes that the dictator Putin will play by the rules. Previously, on March 30th, in an interview with NBC, Trump said that he was very angry with Putin for suggesting that Ukraine should have new leadership.
No, I want to see him make a deal so that we stop Russian soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers and other people from being killed. And I wanted to stop. And some people would say, why do you worry about Russian soldiers or Ukrainian soldiers? I worry because it's like they're just like you people. They're like us. They're like all of us. And I seem to have an ability to do those things. And if I can do that, I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do. And I think we will. No, I want to make sure that he follows through.
The US president has also mentioned that he calls a psychological deadline for when Washington will stop expecting Russia to fulfill the terms of the ceasefire. We cannot allow ourselves to be dragged into Putin's tactic of Stalin, stated Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany Annalena Baerbock, who said that she is ready to remind American partners of this.
A ceasefire on Putin's terms will not end the war. It will only be a prelude to the next offensive. Therefore, I would like to emphasize that there will be no end to European sanctions without peace. Our response to Putin's war is peace through strength, peace through European unity and resolve.
Meanwhile, the president of Finland suggested to his American counterpart that a deadline be set for Moscow April 20th. Additionally, according to Alexander Stubb, Donald Trump is running route of patience with Russia. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War are doubtful that the Kremlin will agree to a ceasefire in the coming weeks.
Russia is unlikely to agree to a full ceasefire without any conditions within 3 weeks, given that Russia has demanded that the West provide some sanctions relief as a precondition for a temporary Black Sea ceasefire. The Kremlin stated on March 25th that it will not implement the agreed ceasefire in the Black Sea until the United States lifts sanctions on Russian state-owned agricultural bank, Rosalkazbank, and other unspecified financial organizations, from the Institute for the Study of War report.
U.S. House of Representatives Republican member Don Bacon is confident that in recent weeks many Republicans, including Trump, have treated Russia with velvet gloves, shying away from calling out Mr. Putin's flatly illegal war. Reported by Alexander Zaslavich, Larissa Petruk, UATV News. Over the past week, Russian forces have struck cities including Kyiv, Kropyvnytsky, Odessa, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, Poltava, Kharkiv, Kryvyi Rih, Sumy, and many other Ukrainian settlements. Civilians have been affected and civilian and energy infrastructure has been damaged.
Our partners must understand that these Russian strikes are not only against our people, but also against all international efforts, against diplomacy, which we are trying to use to end this war. Russia is targeting those who want to end the war. It's impossible to ignore the hundreds of Shahed drones every night. We are expecting a serious response. We are working on it. A strong response is needed, primarily from America, Europe, and everyone in the world who is betting on diplomacy. Russia must be forced into peace, and only force will work.
According to President Zelenskyy, the US proposal for an unconditional ceasefire remains unanswered by Russia for too long. If real pressure had been applied to Russia, a ceasefire could have already been achieved. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine Andrius Kubilius stated that the Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities should be seen as a Kremlin's direct response to US diplomacy.
The Russian drone strike on Dnipro last night killed 4 people and injured more than 24 others, including a pregnant woman. Residential areas are once again being attacked. This is Putin's response to U.S. ceasefire proposals, more war crimes and attacks on civilians. Andrius Kubilius, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on X social network.
The Kremlin intends to continue dragging out negotiations for a temporary ceasefire. That's why Putin has once again claimed that the Ukrainian government is supposedly illegitimate and proposed establishing external governance in Ukraine under the authority of the UN, the US, and the EU. The United Nations, Washington, and Brussels have rejected this proposal and said that the legitimacy of the Ukrainian authorities was beyond question.
Russia, and Putin specifically, as I understand it, have made the decision that as long as they have resources and reserves, they objectively do not want any peace agreements, let alone a ceasefire. The last thing they want is a freeze at the existing front line. When there were talks, they were held.
But when it came to fulfill agreements, Putin began to stall the negotiations, and the Kremlin's propaganda continues to lie about supposed violations by Kyiv. However, Ukraine has hard evidence of Russian strike on energy infrastructure, as stated by President Zelenskyy.
There was a targeted Russian drone strike on the gas infrastructure in Poltava, and an artillery strike on Kherson that damaged the city's electricity infrastructure. One of the Russian strikes on Kharkiv also damaged the city's heating infrastructure. All this shows that Russia will continue to sabotage diplomacy and will do so further. Moscow's only tactic remains to drag out the war. Putin says things that make it seem like he's agreeing with the American side, but in reality, the Russian army continues to press forward with all its military means.
The Kremlin is attempting to undermine the legitimacy of Ukraine's government, believing this will give them the right to violate any agreements, according to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. Putin does not want an end to the war with Ukraine. On the contrary, he is doing everything to capture as much Ukrainian territory as possible.
The Kremlin continues to hold negotiations hostage and is attempting to extract additional concessions from the West following the progress made in the ongoing ceasefire negotiations. The Kremlin remains committed to its goal to prolong any negotiations for a temporary frontline ceasefire or permanent peace agreement in order to continue making incremental gains on the battlefield and establish favorable conditions to pursue Ukraine's complete capitulation. From the Institute for the Study of War report.
Experts believe that the US and the European Union have real leverage over Russia, primarily in the form of additional sanctions that could inflict maximum damage on the aggressor country's economy, thus forcing Russia into peace. Reported by Alexandra Zaslawec, Natalia Husak, Volodymyr Штенгельов, UATV News.